So welcome to episode 2 of our live stream. Uh, so I want to start off with a little bit of a monologue. Talking a lot about Harrison Bergeron, and it was kind of last minute. I brought that up, and if anybody's watching this, either live or in video format, I highly suggest you go Google Harrison Bergeron and read it immediately because it takes about, I mean, 10, 15 minutes tops to read. A fantastic short story by Kurt Vonnegut. And I think the one thing on a lot of people's minds the past month or so has been, how do we continue living in modern society, in this current situation that we have now? What is the best way to carry ourselves? What is the best way to participate in this society that, in many cases wants us dead, right? And I think back in this story and the short summary, right? You have this hyper egalitarian society where everybody is handicapped, right? All individuality is removed, and the average person is totally okay with that, right? You have the Bergeron family. They're just going to watch TV and they appreciate, just sitting there and the buzzing in the ears so they can't think, the weighted suits so they can't move or, show any kind of physical fitness, athletic abilities, things like that. Um, and they're just okay with that, right? And, it's a pretty obvious analogy to, people today, very domesticated. They're just going to go along with whatever's being told. They're going to watch their movies, play their games. They're going to not question what's going on. They're not going to leave their houses, right? They're stuck inside and they're not going to question anything, right? So what are we going to do? Well, I think we need to be the Harrison Bergeron figure, right? You need to be larger than life. You need to stand tall, quite literally. You need to not slouch. You need to carry yourself with an air of strength and intensity. And you need to be the person that you believe that you are. And what I mean by that is, if you believe that we are correct, if we are morally in the right, if you have God on your side, if you have tradition on your side, if you have a better way of living, then that should be evident in the way that you live, right? You should be a strong, even if you can't be physically intimidating, right? I mean, the Harrison Bergeron was a 7 foot tall figure. You know, it doesn't matter. Put on some. Start going to the gym. Right? Become huge. Become larger than life. Become intellectually gifted, right? I mean, and that doesn't mean you might not be an intelligent person, but you can at least educate yourself. You can be able to hold a conversation about a variety of topics, right? You can read books. You can do what I'm doing right now, right? You can read books and talk about that. And I don't think I'm the most intelligent person in the world. I'm no Einstein, but I think just by putting in the time, I can receive knowledge and then convey that knowledge back to you, right? Find a skill, right? And I know this is something Sam Hyde talks about, right? Get a skill. Um, what does that mean? Well, find something that you're good at and then find how you can use that to help others, right? That's what I'm doing right now. I'm an educator by trade, and I think, how can I actually go out there and educate people? And I think that that's, by doing this, right? I mean, there's only so much I can do inside a classroom with everything that's been, handed to us societally. But what I can do here is I can, try and convey some actual real knowledge. We can read old books, we can read classic books, we can read right-wing books, and we can delve deeper into that knowledge, and I can try and teach in my way some of that knowledge towards you, right? So all that winds back to Harrison Bergeron, right? So you need to be Harrison Bergeron. You need to be this strong, larger than life figure, and they will throw everything at you. They will hamper you. They will handicap you. They will try to destroy you. But what are you going to do? You just have to keep going, right? And I mean, the tragic story of Harrison Bergeron is that in the end he is thwarted, right? He is shot and killed. Um, but that should be the only thing that can stop you, right? It should never be you stop willingly, you bend to the regime. It should be until they have to shoot you, you keep standing by your way of life. And that's what Harrison Bergeron did. And that's what you need to do. And then lastly, in some reading, and maybe it's not even a tragic story, because if you do believe in a beyond materialistic metaphysical reality, Harrison Bergeron had his day. He had his day as a king, and he fought the system, and he may not have won, but in that moment, he achieved a degree of self-actualization that not a single other person in his universe had achieved. So even if you are thwarted, even if they do end up coming for you, and even if you do ultimately lose, you haven't lost the greater war, right? The Evolin, the greater and the lesser war. The greater war is always going to be won as long as your spirit is in the right place. Um, so that was just a short monologue regarding Harrison Bergeron that I wanted to bring up because I don't know. I've just been thinking that that's probably the most healthy mindset you can have going into this modern society that we have now. And I think that's one white pill to take with you, right? As long as you be the person that you believe is morally upstanding and right, then stand by that and be that better person, be that stronger person, be that leader, right? Be a person that other people look up to you, even if they don't agree with you, right? Um, and be that person in your community that is the leader, that is the strong person, um, and if they disagree with you politically or otherwise, they're going to at least be forced to respect you, right? So just wanted to talk about that. But we can get into uh, what we read for this week. So for those of us who've been following along, Faust Part 1 was what we read. And so far, I gotta say, the ignoring everything else, it's just a good story. I mean, I think classic plays and such, they are, I mean, better than most things that you could read, right? I mean, even Shakespeare, a lot of that is, pretty intense psychological stuff. And now you have Faust, and overall, it's just very interesting. So, to give a short summary of where we're at, you have this Faust, who is he's a scientist, alchemist, philosopher, kind of. He studies the four main disciplines. I forget what they are. It's law, medicine, philosophy, and maybe mathematics, something like that. So he's this Renaissance man type, intelligent. But he finds himself, uh, he finds himself still lacking in some form of actualization. He is not fulfilled with life. He has come along and he has not. He's come a long way and he has not gotten what he wants out of life. So he attempts to kill himself and he does not go through with it. And this, leads to him having a conversation with some spirits, and then ultimately being visited by a devil who tries to tempt him. And this was something really interesting. The tempting of the devil, obviously, there's some biblical themes here, but it actually reminded me a little bit of the book of Job. Um, I believe the opening of that book of the Bible starts with God and the devil talking, and the devil saying, as the God saying, "You will never corrupt Job, uh, no matter what you do. Any harshness that you give to him, he will not be corrupted, and he will never curse the name of God." Uh, and so this is very similar to what happens with Faust. You have God saying Faust is this genius, a moral, upstanding man. Uh, the devil can try to corrupt him, but he will fail, right? So the devil says, "Challenge accepted." Um, but it is kind of strange because throughout this part one, you kind of see some indicators that Faust is not a very religious man. He attempts to translate the Bible, and we know the very first line of the New Testament, right? In the beginning, there was the Word. And he warps this. He says, he settles on, in the beginning, there was the deed. And I mean, there's got to be something something to that. I haven't really decided what exactly I think Goethe was going for there, and I'm sure some of you guys have opinions. But I thought that was a really interesting line. So we see that Faust is actually not really a man of faith. His faith is in his own reason, right, in his capabilities of reason. And I think that's where we get this idea that we talked about last week of the Faustian man, the worshiper of reason, the person who believes that reason is going to solve all of humanity's problems. So that's where we get Faust, and naturally the devil attempts to tempt him, and he initially turns down the most basic attempts, riches, the material possessions. Then he eventually allows the devil to give him a chance to see the world and take him around to different places. And if he finds a place that I am willing to, that I say I would like to stay here, then he would give his soul to the devil. So I'll pause for a second, read what some of the comments you guys are saying. So first we have Siddhartha saying, "I missed a little because I had to download the app, but I meant to say something about actually realizing your beliefs and actions shows you're not a bullshitter. Lots of talkers, but not many people who actually act on what they say." That's very, very true. And I think especially here, going back to the Harrison Bergeron stuff, if you are not going to live in a way, if you're not going to practice what you preach, how do you expect anybody else to change? If you're going to, claim to hate degeneracy, but you're still watching pornography, right? That's the most basic kind of thing you can imagine in that regard. Or if you're going to hate weak people and you're not going to exercise yourself, or if you hate, if you think, your average normie is idiot, uninformed, and you're not going to be informed and intelligent, then what makes you better than anybody else? Because you watched 3 YouTube videos and now you have your entire metaphysical reality figured out for you? No, this is a constant process throughout our lives. You need to learn and develop as a human being, and you need to, if you really do find something that you believe, you need to actualize that belief into reality. So it's a very good point. And then regarding the in the beginning there was the deed, thought versus action. Well, yeah, I think there's obviously it's something about thought versus action, but the wider implications of Faust and what it means to be Faustian, right? Are we saying that the Faustian man is going to worship deed more than thought, right? Or more than, or even more than word or logos in the religious sense, right? Are we going to say that we respect our own actions more than we respect the logos of God, right? And that is a very important thing. And you can say, in a lot of respects, the Faustian man has totally abandoned uh, true logos, true reason and uh, reason with respect to, uh, biblical reason, uh, reason reaching towards God, um, and put that in favor of this material reason, right? That is uh, in the effort to create actions, to build, to pursue material things, right? So I think that is a very good a good take on the deed versus word, right? Then we have Chad67 saying, could one say that Faust is a representation of man in the Enlightenment era? Well, I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, we talked all last week about what it means to be the Faustian man, uh, and exactly what it was this. Um, it's not a it's not a praise of the man of the Enlightenment. It's surely a critique, right? You have this man who succumbs to the temptations of the devil. Uh, and yeah, so for sure, Faust is a negative look of the perils of chasing reason in the quest for actualization and power and things like that. And so we have Cassius saying, Faust is not a godly man. He is driven near to suicide and depression for lack of God, then chases worldly desires with the help of Mephistopheles. I think this story might be a cautionary tale about missing the true meaning in the world in our quest to acquire understanding. That's a great take. I think, uh, I mean, I think I said a lot last week about how the Faustian spirit is dead, but I think I don't. It's not dead; it's dying, right? And you see the people that are, you see tons of people that are an exact archetype of this Faustian man. Exactly what you're saying, driven either to suicide or near suicide for lack of God. We have a secular society; nobody's spiritual, and everybody wants to kill themselves. And what does that end up with them chasing? Status, money, and and at least those things uh, can provide some kind of materialistic actualization. Whereas some people don't even go that far; they'll chase comfort. They just want to play video games all day. They just want to, and even in the lower sense than that, they just want to do drugs, right? And so, yeah, you have this Faustian man uh, who finds himself lacking because of a lack of faith, a lack of uh, belief in God, and he then goes on to chase worldly desires through the devil. And well, we haven't made it to part two, so I'm not going to go ahead and say that he's going to suffer the consequences, but I have a big hunch that he will. I think that he will probably, things won't end well for Faust. That is my prediction, but don't quote me on that. So yeah, you have Faust, and you have these interpretations of the character, uh, and yeah, so he goes off with Mephistopheles, and he's being shown a lot of these things, and the thing that he eventually settles on that is giving him interest is this woman, right? After he takes this potion this potion of youth that makes him youthful, um, he takes this. It also makes women more attractive to him. So this Gretchen or Margaret or Marguerite, depending on what translation or version, uh, or even what scene. I mean, the version I'm reading changes the name of the character almost every scene. It's quite confusing. I don't know about any other people, but I actually had to. I would read the chapter and then I would go through or read the scene and then I would read a quick summary of the scene to make sure I caught all the main things. And there was so much that I missed. Um, it, and I felt really stupid because there was the whole scene where he gives uh, he gives Margaret the sedative to put his mother asleep, um, so that he could come over and presumably they could have sex with each other. And I mean, I just read into the next chapter, and they don't ever explicitly say that anything happened. So I didn't even notice that that had occurred, right? And then I read, like, oh, so then he got her pregnant. I'm like, how did he get her pregnant if there wasn't even, if he didn't even go over? But a lot happens off screen, right? Which I think is actually, um, that's a testament to good writing, right? And you can have stuff happen off screen. Uh, and I mean, this was meant to be a performance, and I think it would be very clear to the viewer what exactly is happening. But yeah, it was quite interesting. Um, but yeah, so he finally finds this woman who he's in love with, and then the second he gets what he wants out of her, right, that material pleasure, uh, then he's done. He says, "Yeah, I'm out of here," and then ends up she ends up, being pregnant. Then you have this whole scene with the brother outside the house who is going to try and defend her honor by attacking Faust, who the brother is killed, and then goes on this pretty, I mean, by today's standards, uh, incredibly misogynistic, and I don't use that in a I don't necessarily say that in a negative term. I mean, it's kind of the truth back then, right? There's a rant about how she's a whore and she's brought disgrace to his family, and all this with his dying breath. So with his dying breath, he curses his own sister as a whore. So this is something that you would absolutely never see in anything written, past 1900. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But I mean, I liked that scene. I thought it was very. I mean, it was real, and and this is kind of how it is, or how it should be to a degree, if in a traditional society. You have this familial sense of honor, and you do not want that disrespected. So I think, the brother is a pretty good archetype of this traditional man, right? Willing to die for his honor in a way that has been totally lost on the modern man, right? There is, I mean, you would never, I mean, well, we don't have duels anymore. You just couldn't even fathom the idea of dying over your personal honor of a person that isn't even yourself, right? You would die for your sister's honor. Um, I don't know, quite interesting. And then so she ends up bring back duels, says Siddhartha. I agree. I think duels would actually be. We could fix a lot if we allowed duels again. You wouldn't have idiots saying dumb shit on the internet that they couldn't back up, right? You guys might hear my dog clawing at my door right now, so apologize for that. I'm not Epstein keeping children locked away. That's just my dog. Uh, but yeah, so then you have Margaret goes to church, trying to confess her sins and what exactly she did wrong, and also the death of her own mother, which was also not at all clear in the book. When she tried to sedate the mother, uh, when she tried to sedate the mother so that Faust could sneak into her room, she ended up killing her own mother. So she kills her mother, is pregnant with a bastard child, and now her brother has been killed by Faust and Mephistopheles dueling him. So she's left with nothing. She faints in church and then ends up in prison. Meanwhile, you have Faust, and this is this really interesting this really interesting chapter called Walpurgis Night. So I had to look up what that was, but apparently it was the holiday of the last day in April, uh, so right before May Day, uh, and it was allegedly this night where the demonic spirits, witches, etc., would come out. Um, and then you have Faust participating in these orgiastic situations, and this is a representative of the final moral decline, right? Decline into the materialism, total rejection of God, rejection of love, and then uh, the metaphorical, not literal, descent into hell, right? If you have this hero's journey archetype, you have the character making this hellward descent. Um, this was his hell, right? Being surrounded by demons, witches, this Dionysian scene that we have. And then that's the kind of penultimate scene in part one before he actually returns to Margaret and tries to get her to escape, right? And then you have this final failure of Faust where he cannot rescue her, right? He tries to rescue her and ends up leaving without her. So going into scene two, we are left with a very, morally destitute Faust, a person who's failed at his goals, and a person who's altogether not happy. And if this is our Faustian man, sounds about right, right? We uh, made this pact to try and expand our forces of reason into trying to achieve some type of pleasure, some type of actualization, and we end up morally bankrupt, unhappy, and uh, failed on all of our goals that we've set for ourselves, right? We have failure to find love. We have failure to provide for our own, right? We have this Faust had a child, right? He sired a child, and now the child is dead. Once again, what greater metaphor for Faustian civilization could you have? The abandonment of the child. I mean, we have a child where we have a society where if you're not killed, you're probably raised by a single parent, um, and very few kids are growing up in non-divorced, strong nuclear families. And this has been the culmination of all of our efforts, right? Uh, all of our chasing of reason and modernity and egalitarianism and who knows what else. This is what we've achieved, right? We have broken families and unhappy children, moral bankruptcy, and failure. So, yeah, so far, I think the ideal of the Faustian man is uh, quite quite shameful. Uh, so we have the last few comments. The last one was in Uruguay, not around the 90s. The last Chad country. I think you meant around the 90s. So I guess Uruguay actually had duels in the 90s. Yeah, that is pretty awesome. Still not going to get me to move to Uruguay for obvious reasons, but I will give them a point for that. And then Walpurgis Night is the precursor to Halloween. I kind of got that as an implication. I mean, obviously there's a obvious similarities between this Walpurgis Night and Halloween, but I didn't know it was actually a precursor. That one grew out of the other. uh, well, I think I've said a lot, and we talked a lot last week about the Faustian man. So if anybody has any thoughts that they'd like to share, I'll open up the lines in a Discord, uh, or you can post any thoughts you have in the chat, and we can go back and forth with that. So we have Siddhartha saying religious reason not equal to scientific reason. Yeah, I very much agree. That's why I kept using earlier logos. Right, we talk about logos, either word or reason. This Greek word um, usually is used in a strictly religious sense, right? As in this um, reason in the sense of a deeper understanding of our relationship with the untouchable, with the spiritual, with what we conceive as God, right? And it doesn't have to be a purely Christian logos. I mean, I think you have Christian scholars who mostly focus on uh, this branch of theology, but I think logos, from what I understand, is actually this idea has been traced through almost every religious culture. And I know E. Michael Jones has a book that just came out about this. I have not read it. I can only read so many 1,000 page books a year, but it's definitely on my list at some point. Um, I know some people in here have read it, so perhaps they could give their opinion on that. We'd say more like intuition and less analysis. If that's so, I assume that that's what you're saying about religious reason, right? So we say religious reason is closer to intuition than it is something like the scientific method, right? Um, and I think that's very true in the sense that we have, we have this faculty of reason, right? That's always talked about. Humans have reason, but I think our reason is not purely materialistic, right? I mean, and or at least I believe this, and I think many of you believe this. I think the average person might not believe this. You have this intrinsic, intuitive idea of what is right and what is wrong, right? You feel a natural aversion towards that which is not good for the soul in a basic sense, right? Um, we see, uh, I mean, even something like same-sex couples, right? It's like, um, so you sometimes you can't really rationally argue against that. I mean, I believe I could, and I believe many of you could, but at the end of the day, it's this natural, intuitive sense of like this is wrong. It's some metaphysical way, right? There is a order to the universe that is meant to be, and this is a subversion of that order. This is a usurpation of that order. What do you think is the significance of Harrison being the son of the main characters? Also, he is 14 years old when this happens, which is kind of funny. So, going back to Harrison Bergeron, yes, you have a 14-year-old boy who is 7 feet tall, 300 plus pounds, and able to lift 5,000 pounds. Um, I mean, in one way, it's just funny, but there actually is a deeper meaning to this, and this is actually something I definitely should have brought up, and I forgot to. Um, but first, when you say what is the significance of Harrison being the son of the main characters, well, I think it just shows that you have this divide, right? You have people that are totally willing to go along with whatever is happening, right? The handicapper general, um, but it doesn't matter your upbringing, right? So Harrison's parents were totally, domesticated. They were totally uh, complicit in this system, and he obviously was not raised to be defiant to that system. It arose naturally because it was against the natural order. And this is actually a really important part of the story that can easily get overlooked. Is almost uh, if something is unnatural, if something is against the order of the universe, if something is not righteous, righteousness will rise up to take its place. And you have this character of Harrison, who was just he was willed into existence almost, right? I mean, obviously, it's unnatural for a 14-year-old to be 7 feet tall. It's unnatural for a 14-year-old to be 300 pounds. I mean, he's almost a messiah figure, right? It's like saying that if there is evil in the world, good is going to manifest itself to fight it regardless, right? And it's an inevitability as long as there is something against the order. So Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest white pill in the story is that he's this incredibly this prodigy. You know, he's an absolute genius. He is a musical genius. He can dance. He's athletic. He's gigantic. He's intimidating. He's handsome. All of these things, and but most importantly, he is righteous. Right? He is the embodiment of uh, what a person should be, and this anti-egalitarianism, and he is inevitable, right? Uh, he is going to arise as long as the system is against the natural order. So now, trying to obtain what is holy and immaterial with the means of the world corrupts them. That's why, well, them as in you, right? Trying to obtain what is holy and immaterial in the world and the means of the world corrupts you. That's why Faust fails to obtain true love with Gretchen, because he tries to obtain and reason it with worldly and materialistic means. One has to balance scientific reason with religious faith. Very true, right? Can anybody explain love in a purely reasonable, scientific, um, scientific manner? And I mean, I used to be one of these people. I used to say, love does not exist. Love is uh, a contract. It is a purely rational thing that occurs because we have hormones and we are animals, right? Whereas then you realize that that's never going to achieve you happiness. That's never going to achieve you an understanding of the world. You kind of need to have this metaphysical understanding of what this is, and Faust does not, and that's why he can't find true love, because, like you said, he's going through this um, purely materialistic rationalization for his feelings. So now, Der Trollermensch says, reminds me of how, in the afterword of 1984, the regime they live under is referred to in the past tense, which is a major white pill. Uh, yeah, and well, that's something in 1984. In this, the white pill isn't Harrison. The white pill isn't Harrison being shot, but the white pill is the fact that he rose up and was able to exist despite the circumstances around him. Right, I'm letting my dog in because she's about to tear this door open. So now we have Chad saying, it's no coincidence Faust is a doctor. Yeah, that's great. I think modern doctors are some pretty morally destitute people. Yes, base doggo, she came in to say hi. All right, well, I mean, there's some great comments from you guys. And if anybody wants to, I don't think anybody ended up coming to the voice chat, which is fine. I'll give you guys one last opportunity to do that. But I don't know, unless anybody has any final thoughts. I think you guys had some really good input. But I will probably end the stream if nobody else wants to talk. We have been going for like, I don't know, 45 minutes, so I think that's pretty good for the audience we have. We peaked at 9 viewers. That's pretty big. Okay, so Casey is saying, do the alchemical, is that how you say that? That's interesting. And other esoteric references in Faust point to a deeper meaning, as they would generally be understood by contemporary audiences. Very good question, and I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's some people in circles who have done their fair studying of alchemy, or even something like Jung's um, psychology and alchemy, right? Uh, I'm sure there's tons of stuff in there in the same way. I mean, almost everything written um, by those Masonic types includes stuff like that. Um, and I talked last week about how Faust, is actually it's not an original story. right? This was a character that wasn't it was written about 200, maybe 300 years before Goethe by Marlowe, who is this esoteric Mason Kabbalist, right? So this is a figure that is deeply rooted in esotericism, and I'm sure there's a lot of deeper stuff that you could go into with this book, and a 45-minute um, discussion is definitely not going to cover everything. But I mean, yeah, if I were a Faust academic, I could probably tell you what all of this stuff means. But I'm just a guy, so but yeah, I mean that's a good thing to bring up, and I would be interested if anybody had done a really deep dive into the esotericism in Faust. And then Siddhartha talking about the scene with the earth spirit being pretty heavy. I think the scene with, you mean the early scene, right, where the spirit comes to him, and then I even remember Goethe was really influenced by Persian literature. I actually did not know that at all. In fact, I would be hard pressed to name any Persian literature. So let's see, Persian literature. I took a whole class on Persian history in college. Do you think I would retain anything? All I remember is I mean, there was Zoroastrianism, right? That was Persian, and I'm sure they have pretty extensive mythology, although I'm not very well versed in that either. Um, but I do know a lot of esotericist types. They really read into Zoroastrianism and all of that. So yeah, plenty of connections there. um, but all right, I think there's a lot there. It was with Hafiz's poems. No idea who that is. um, so well, I guess that's another thing to look into. Um, but I think, well, I guess I think I'll wrap up. I mean, feel free to post any final thoughts. But next week we'll be talking about Faust Part 2, and maybe some other stuff. I'll try and send any articles that I think are worth discussing. For the most part, I want to keep this um, academic in a sense of, not necessarily talking about current events and all of that. I think there's plenty of people doing that already. I'd rather talk about, these philosophical ideas and things like that. So, anything that you think is interesting, anything that you'd like to see talked about or brought up, feel free to let me know. And, I want this to kind of be a collaborative effort. And hopefully we can grow it larger and larger. So, thanks everybody who showed up. It was really fun talking to you. And I guess I will sign off here.